Welcome back, everybody. Stonethorn has hit the PTS, and we have been graced with some patch notes from ZeniMax. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at all of the class and general combat changes coming into Stonethorn. I did a separate video where I went over all of the set changes. They are absolutely massive, so be sure to check that out as well if you guys want to see that. All in all, I really like a lot of the Stonethorn changes. Just in the general combat department, there are a few class changes that I'm not super crazy about, but Stonethorn is shaping up to be looking like quite an interesting patch to play, so let's get into it. Now let's take a look at those class changes. Starting off with Dragon Knight, there have been some fixes to the standard ability, then Draconic Power, the Inhale, Deep Breath Morph. This explosion now deals 25% more damage, and the initial hit will no longer rank up in damage. And then the Draw Essence Morph, this morph now heals for 140% of the damage done, up from 100%. So a little bit of changes to those skills, but not anything super huge for DK. Moving on to Necromancer. Now, Necromancer's big change here, I think, Shocking Siphon. This ability's explosion will now occur when the tether ends for any reason. So if you just keep retethering all the bodies on the ground, they'll just keep exploding with the Siphon ability. So this adds a lot of viability to this skill that, especially in PvP, was maybe a little bit lacking. Grave Grasp has got some serious rework. The first area now snares enemies hit by 30%. The second area will immobilize enemies hit for 4 seconds, and the final area will stun enemies hit for 3 seconds rather than snaring them. Now, this final stun here, I'm going to assume functions like the Fear and is going to be unblockable, undodgeable. This gives Necromancer a very interesting crowd control ability that can function as all 3 different crowd controls. So, yeah, it's just going to be tricky to use because positioning becomes very important. The Ghostly Embrace morph of this will now increase the duration of all negative effects applied by this ability rather than adding an immobilize effect to each field. And the Empowering Grasp will now make the Empower last for 5 seconds for the whole duration instead of being consumed when you use a light attack. So that's it for Necromancer. Not a lot of changes there. Again, let's move on to Nightblade. This is where things get interesting, guys. Grim Focus, this ability and its morphs now grant 2% critical damage and healing per stack, rather than reducing your damage taken by 2% per stack. This is huge, man. They just gave Nightblade another 10% plus critical damage. They're losing the durability from this, but holy man, Damage Nightblade just got a big buff from this guy here. And, of course, when you shoot the bow, you'll lose those stacks, but these critical damage stacks, I'm going to assume, will be part of that projectile shot too. Honestly, this makes Grim Focus an incredibly good skill. Now, the Master Assassin passive has also been changed. This passive weapon and damage is now granted to your damaging attacks against enemies you are flanking, rather than granting it when you're in sneak or invisible. And it gives a flat 258 weapon damage now when you attack someone from behind or from the flank. This is, again, massive for Nightblade because they retain a lot of damage out of stealth here and still retain that burst in stealth. So some big buffs to Damage Nightblade with these 2 changes here. Now, Shadow Cloak, they're fixing it so that the Siege will no longer pull you out of Cloak. This is definitely something I've noticed playing Nightblade this patch. And then Strife, they increase the damage done for this ability and the Funnel Health morph by 39%, to ensure they adhere to heal over time standards. So a little bit of a buff to that guy there. All in all, man, Nightblade, I think, especially Stamina Nightblade, is looking really good next patch. Magicka Nightblade 2, don't get me wrong, but Stamblade has kind of always been king. Now, Sorcerer has got some really big changes too. Crystal Shards, they reduce the cast time of this ability and its morphs to 800 milliseconds down from 1. They reduce the damage by 21%. That is a huge damage cut to Sorc's favorite high damage spammable ability. The cost has also been reduced slightly as well. Now, the way that these skills function now is that after successfully casting them, your next non-ultimate ability used will cost 10% less. So we get a little bit of sustain from making sure we use the Crystal Shards. Now, the Crystal Fragments morph is still going to give you that ability for the instant proc that deals increased damage. It can now proc off itself, though, so back-to-back frags. Is this something that we could see? Really cool. But let's get on to this. Crystal Blast. This ability has been reworked into a stamina morph and renamed Crystal Weapon. It is an instant cast ability that causes your next light or heavy attack to be made within 4 seconds to deal additional damage equal to the standard spammable amount, such as Lava Whip or Veiled Strike. Enemies hit by this ability will have their armor reduced by up to 1,000. This is really, really good. Honestly, adding the spammable to both the light and the partially charged and fully charged heavy attacks makes it so that you can use this ability on any build that you want. Stamina Sorcerer finally gets its stamina attack. It has 2 now, actually. It has the kind of damage over time one or burst one from the daggers, and now the Crystal Blast morph. I really like how it's tied to the light and heavy attacks as well. There's lots of build potential here too. And Encase will now restore 66% of its cost if no targets were immobilized from the cast. Encase is very expensive, so all in all, I think that is a good call. Daedric Summoning. All the pets of this skill line will now use a hybrid of either your spell damage and max magicka instead of just your max magicka, and this is to take more emphasis off of the Shield Sorc build. The Shield Sorc, of course, being probably the best way to build a sorcerer, so having the pet scale off spell damage now as well just gives you more incentive to explore different build routes, I think, with your Sorc. The Rebate passive now restores 300 magicka or stamina when one of your Daedric Summoning or non-ultimate abilities end, rather than restoring it when your pet dies. So you get a lot more sustain, I think, out of the Rebate than we used to. And the Summon Unstable Clan Fear, the ability special attack is now halved when healing itself, and that's all the changes really to the pets outside of fixes. I think that Sorc is going to be pretty interesting next patch. Mag Sorc taking what looks like a little bit of a nerf, and Stam Sorc getting a bit of a buff, so it'll be a good time for Sorcerer next patch, I think. Templar, big changes as well. Burning Light has been completely reworked, so it triggers when you deal damage 4 times within rapid succession with Daedric Spear abilities, rather than having a 25% chance to proc per hit. This is good and bad. I mean, it takes the randomness out of Burning Light, but at the same time, it makes Burning Light pretty useless for a majority of the Daedric Spear skill line. Honestly, this only really works for jabs and maybe the ultimate because it pulses out as well. Every other Daedric Spear skill, and Blazing Spear, I guess, would get it too, but yeah, the Javelin is not going to utilize Burning Light really well at all. Honestly, this I don't really like this change, but I understand they want to take all the random procs out of the game, so that's their goal here. I think they could have reworked this differently, though. And the big kicker, though, Radial Sweep, this ultimate and its morphs now have a minor cast time to help better sync their damage and animation, as well as adding more time for the player to react to this undodgeable ultimate. Honestly, I don't even want to go back to the whole cast time discussion. ZeniMax likes this. I think this sucks. It's not great for Templar, not great really for the game. But moving on. Cleansing Ritual, this morph will now sacrifice its healing potential for the damage rather than adding damage on top of the healing. And the damage is increased by 5% each tick for the duration to a max of 35%. So this will no longer heal you and just be an offensive move. Very interesting shift for this skill. I did like that it was a mix before. It made it really cool, but okay. Healing Ritual, they reduce the cost of this ability and its morphs to 5,265, down from 7,290, and they decrease the healing of these abilities by 25%, just to make it in standard with the other AoE heals. And then the Lightweaver passive has had some big changes too. It's been updated so that healing an ally under 50% of any restoring light ability restores 2 ultimate rather than restoring the 2 ultimate when healing an ally under 60% with Healing Ritual. This is really big for Stamina Templar. They're going to get a lot better, well, not a lot better, but slightly better alt gen, which will be nice. All in all, the Templar changes are not the best. I'm not a big fan of pretty much all of them. Save maybe Lightweaver. Now moving on to the weapon changes. Mostly just fixes here. 2-hand critical charge. The Stampede morph will now deal AoE damage on impact as well. And then the heavy armor immovable. This morph will now rank up in duration of major resolve granted rather in CC immunity granted. I'm not sure if the CC immunity duration has been changed though. Now, Vampire has had some changes. They decreased the execute multiplier for Eviscerate and Arterial Burst to 33%, down from 50%. The Blood for Blood morph, they decreased the execute multiplier on this to 60% down from 100%, so a big nerf to this skill. However, it was pulling insane DPS in dungeons. And after casting this ability, you cannot be healed by allies for 5 seconds. Big change to this guy. They fixed an issue where Mistform speed ribbons would appear, but Mistform is still not working in PvP unless they ninja fixed it and didn't mention it here. As it sits right now, Mistform just doesn't work half the time. And then finally, moving on to Vigor, it is now the first ability you unlock when you enter the Alliance War. Honestly, just entering the Alliance War, doing your first quest there, you don't even have to fight stuff, and you unlock Vigor. But the downside to this is that you now need to level up to get rapid maneuvers, which is a huge deal for horse mobility. So, yeah, give and take a little bit. Give and take. I'd love to hear what you guys think there. And moving on to itemization changes, they fixed an issue where the enchants that reduce your stamina cost were reducing the cost of dodge and bash and other core stamina mechanics. This is a good change. I mean, it's been this way for the longest time. Rip this little gem of sustain. The armor traits have also got some changes. They've all kind of been changed to favor more active gameplay versus passive gameplay, and we'll get into that in a sec. Divines being boosted to 9.1%, down from 7.5%, so a nice change to Divines there, making it a lot more attractive as an offensive armor trait, or even defensive ones, depends what Mundus you're using. Impen has been nerfed again to 127. Honestly, I'm totally fine with this. A few months back, I did a video comparing the armor traits back in that patch, and I had said in that video that they could nerf Impen by over 50% of its current value, which was 258 at the time, and it would still be the best option for an armor trait. Well, here it is. They have nerfed it by over 50%. I still think people are going to run it because it's still a good option. But with the base crit resist added to the game and the buffs to the other traits here, I think we'll see a lot more variety than the standard 7 Impen in PvP. Infused has gotten some treatment, 25% bonus instead of 20%. Invigorating will now grant 16 of each recovery, up from 11%. That is the biggest buff out of all of these changes here. Invig got like a 40% increase in its value. That is huge. Nirnhoned decreased the armor value to 253, down from 301. Again, nerfing that passive defense. And well-fitted, they increased the cost reduction to 6%, up from 5%. Again, buffing the active defense on our armor traits. I really like these changes. I think armor-wise, we should see better balance in this patch, but we'll have to wait and see until it hits the server. Now the weapon traits have got some work too. Decisive, they increased the chance for this trait to proc to 27.5%, and then 55%, up from 40%. So a big buff to Decisive as well. Defending and Sharpened, they increased the penetration and armor values that these give to 3,276, up from 2,752. I like this quite a bit because Sharpened is the best option for damage, and it doesn't give you a bonus to healing. So this puts Sharpened even further in that great class of its own. Precise increased the critical chance granted to 8.6%, up from 7%. So a big buff to Precise as well. And I like this change again because I like them crit builds, and Precise, of course, will give you a bonus to healing by allowing your crits to, or your heals to crit. Now, the jewelry traits have also gotten reworked here too. Arcane and Robust have had a slight increase to 877. Bloodthirsty, this will now grant 250 weapon and spell damage against targets under 90% health, scaling per 1% health missing, rather than granting that flat 10% damage bonus that it used to targets under 25% health. I really like this change because Bloodthirsty was only really being used by PvE DPS builds that wanted to have really high DPS for that execute phase, and now it not only retains that usefulness for a PvE DPS build, but it opens up good options for builds that maybe don't have access to an execute, but don't want to give up all their traits just for Bloodthirsty. Honestly, this is interesting. I'll have to play around with this on the PTS. This could potentially be a very good trait. Harmony got a big nerf, down to 20% from 35%. I think this is good. We've all seen at least once in our lives the ridiculous Harmony builds going around, so this is probably going to be healthy, especially for group combat. They've increased the max health granted to 965, up from 957, so a tiny little buff there. Swift is back up to 7%. That's beautiful, man. A big buff to Swift. And then Triune has gotten a little bit of a max stat increase on it as well. And then when we take a look at the Mundus Stones, the Atronach and the Serpent have had a huge increase. 310 recovery on these guys, up from 238. The Mage and the Tower have had a slight resource decrease to 2,023, down from 2,028. And then the Lord, they decreased the max health to 2,225, losing 5 health from its previous value. The Lady and the Lover, they have decreased the armor and the penetration given to 2,744, down from 2,752. So very, very minor, like 1% changes in a lot of these. And then the Thief has had that very slight 1537 crit strike rating versus the old 1533. The Ritual, they've decreased the healing done on this Mundus down to 8% from 10. And then finally, the Shadow has been decreased to 11% rather than the 13% than it had before. So the Munduses in general all seem to be a little bit weaker than they used to be. Some of them got nerfed a little bit more, like the Shadow on the damage end of things. But the Sustain Munduses got huge buffs here, and with the changes to Divine's traits, honestly, a lot of these Mundus are going to be a lot better off in the new patch than they were in the last patch, especially if you're willing to run Divines for it. I did the math on the Shadow. This guy will be exactly the same. So there you go, guys. Those are all the changes that we can look forward to seeing this patch. Of course, this is the PTS, so none of these are permanent. We might see some changes to them before they hit the live server. All in all, I am looking forward to this new patch. There are some really nice, interesting changes here. My one concern about this patch is that Stamina Nightblade looks like it's going to be really, really good. So we'll see how it plays out. Again, I would love to hear what you guys think about these changes. So let me know down in the comments below if you guys are interested in sending in your own clips for the top 5, or if you want to send in a build to be featured on the channel, you can send that to KristoferESO@hotmail.com. Give me a follow on Twitter to keep up to date with my shenanigans and when I'm streaming. You can also check out my Twitch to catch that live gameplay. I have a stream schedule coming soon for you guys. Check out KristoferESO.com for a hub to all of my ESO content, written guides to my builds and everything. And last but not least, we are sponsored by What the Fast. They're a VPN for gamers, and they give us better ping to our favorite games. They're free to try for the first 30 days via the link in the description below. And finally, a big shout out and a big thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon. Without you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this job, so thank you so much for helping me make this job a reality. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in and watching. And as always, I hope that you guys have a great night, and I'll see you next time.